My name is Liam. I'm 17, and I go to Ridgeway High. I've been playing football since I was a kid, and I've always been the type to stay late after practice, perfecting my game. Being the last one in the locker room didn't bother me. That place was my second home, or at least it used to be. It all started about 3 weeks ago. It was a regular evening, and practice had just ended. The guys had left, and I stayed back to stretch. When I finally made my way into the locker room, something felt off. I can't explain it, but there was this strange tension in the air, like someone was watching me. I shook it off, figuring it was just my imagination. But as I was grabbing my stuff, I noticed deep scratches on the walls. They were jagged, like they'd been done with something sharp. I laughed it off, thinking some of the guys were playing around or being careless. But the more I looked at the scratches, the more uneasy I felt. They didn't look like normal wear and tear. They looked like claw marks. I tried not to let it get to me. The next few days passed without anything strange happening. But I couldn't stop thinking about those scratches. Then, one afternoon, I got to my locker and froze. Right there, carved deep into the metal of my locker door, were the words, "I'm watching you." I stared at it for a long time, my stomach twisting. At first, I thought it was one of the guys messing with me. I mean, that's what high school is, right? Pranks, jokes, trying to get into each other's heads. So I let it go, even though it left me unsettled. But then came the night that changed everything. It was after a long, hard practice. The sky was dark, and most of the guys had already left. I was the last one in the showers, and the water was scalding hot, just the way I liked it. Steam filled the room, and I could barely see anything past my own hand. I was rinsing off when the lights flickered, just for a second. Then they flickered again. I wiped the water from my eyes, my heart racing, and that's when I saw it. A shadow darted across the room. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a trick of the light. Someone, or something, was in there with me. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I turned off the water, grabbed my towel, and bolted out of there, heart pounding in my chest. I threw on my clothes in record time and rushed out of the locker room, not daring to look back. When I got to my car, I sat there for a minute, breathing hard, trying to convince myself that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The next morning, I walked into school like nothing had happened. Maybe I was just overthinking it. Maybe it was all in my head. But when I got to the locker room that afternoon, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. The school was buzzing with rumors, and the locker room was cordoned off by yellow tape. My heart sank as I learned what had happened. Marcus, one of my teammates, had been found dead in the showers that morning. His body was covered in deep cuts, deliberate and precise. The whole school was in shock. Marcus had been one of the nicest guys on the team, and now he was gone, just like that. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The scratches on the walls, the shadow in the showers, the message on my locker. It wasn't a prank. This was real. Someone had been watching us, stalking us. I went to the police, told them everything I'd seen, everything that had happened. They took me seriously, but they didn't have much to go on. There were no cameras in the locker room, no clear evidence pointing to who might have done it. They told me to stay alert, to keep my eyes open. The next few days were a blur of fear and paranoia. Every creak, every flicker of the lights, every shadow made me jump. I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next attack. I started leaving practice early, never staying behind alone. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. One night, I was at home, trying to sleep, when I heard a noise outside my window. I shot up in bed, heart racing, but when I looked, there was nothing there, just darkness. But I knew, deep down, that whoever had been in that locker room wasn't done. I don't go to the locker room alone anymore. None of us do. The whole team is on edge, waiting for the next move. The police are still investigating, but they haven't found anything. I don't know who's out there or what they want, but I do know one thing. They're still watching, and I'm next. My name's Jessica, and when I first transferred to Highland High, I was just trying to fit in. New school, new faces, new rules. It's always hard being the new kid. But at Highland, there was one thing everyone seemed to talk about. Emily. Emily was this ghost story that everyone whispered about in the halls. According to the rumors, she died in a freak accident years ago during a lockdown drill. Supposedly, she fell down the stairs and broke her neck. They said she never left the school after that. And sometimes, students would still hear her footsteps late at night or find strange things in their lockers, like old notes with her name on them. Honestly, I thought it was all just a dumb story to scare people. You know how high school is. Someone always trying to freak you out. So, I didn't pay much attention to it until things started happening to me. About a month into my time at Highland, I opened my locker one afternoon and found a note. It was folded up and slipped between my books. When I opened it, my heart skipped a beat. "Welcome to Highland, Jessica. Emily." I just stared at it, feeling the chill run down my spine. The handwriting was jagged and uneven, like it had been scrawled in a hurry. My first thought was that it was a prank, maybe one of the girls trying to mess with the new kid. But then it happened again the next day. This time, the note was darker. "Join me, Jessica. I'm waiting. Emily." The handwriting looked more aggressive, almost like the pen had dug into the paper. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just some elaborate joke, but I couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling that crept into my chest. It was getting under my skin. I even asked a few classmates about it, but they either laughed it off or told me I was imagining things. One night, during a lockdown drill, things took a terrifying turn. It was after school hours, and I stayed behind to finish an assignment. When the drill started, I quickly slipped into the nearest bathroom to wait it out. I didn't want to deal with running to my classroom in the middle of a drill. The bathroom was empty and quiet, the faint echo of the school's alarm system muffled by the walls. That's when the lights went out. At first, I thought it was just part of the drill, maybe someone messing with the circuit. But then I heard it, whispering. Soft, almost like a breeze, but there was a voice in it. My pulse quickened, and I froze, straining to hear the sound again. "Jessica." It was faint, but unmistakable. My name. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I was suddenly aware of how alone I was. The bathroom was pitch black, and the only sound was the dripping of the faucet. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A shadow. It was faint at first, but it grew darker, and then I saw it. Her, standing near the farthest stall. I couldn't make out her face, but I knew it was Emily. I felt the blood drain from my face as I stared at her motionless figure. Her form was blurry, like she was barely there, but she was watching me. I couldn't take it anymore. I bolted for the door, nearly tripping over myself as I shoved it open and sprinted down the hall. My legs felt like jelly, but I didn't stop until I reached the front office where some teachers were gathered. I was shaking so badly they had to sit me down. The next day, I found out the truth. It wasn't Emily that had been haunting me after all. The janitor had been arrested that morning. Apparently, he'd been using the story of Emily for years to lure girls into dark, secluded places around the school. He knew how to trigger the lockdown drills and cut the power to certain parts of the school. He'd been preying on students like me, using the ghost story to cover his tracks. The police found dozens of notes in his office, all with names of girls he targeted. My name was on the list too. He'd been following me, watching my every move. When I thought it was Emily whispering my name, it had actually been him, hiding in the shadows. Even though he's locked away now, I can't shake the feeling that something's still wrong with Highland. I can't explain it, but sometimes when the school's quiet and the halls are empty, I still feel like I'm not alone. Maybe Emily's story was just a legend, but there's a part of me that wonders if she's really gone. Maybe she's still here, waiting for someone else to fall into her trap. I'll never forget the first time I noticed something was off about our new substitute teacher, Mr. Holloway. He was quiet, way too quiet for a teacher, and he always seemed to avoid making eye contact with anyone. During class, he just stood there, speaking only when absolutely necessary, like he didn't want to be noticed. But I noticed, and so did my friend Lily. One afternoon, after school, Lily and I sat by the lockers, talking about how weird Mr. Holloway was. The bell had already rung, and most people had left. We saw him walking down the hallway, heading towards the exit without even a glance in our direction. "I bet he's hiding something," Lily said, half joking, but with a nervous look in her eyes. I nodded, feeling the same uneasy vibe. We decided to follow him. It felt risky, but we were too curious to stop ourselves. We stayed far enough back so he wouldn't notice us as we trailed him out of school and down the street. He didn't head into town, though. Instead, he walked down a side road towards the outskirts, where the houses got older and more rundown. Finally, Mr. Holloway turned toward an old, abandoned-looking house. It had broken windows, peeling paint, and overgrown weeds crawling up the sides. I felt my stomach twist as we watched him pull out a key, unlock the door, and disappear inside. "What do we do now?" I whispered to Lily. "Let's come back tonight," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "See what's really going on." We waited until it was dark, sneaking out of our houses and meeting up near the old house. The whole street was quiet, not a soul in sight. We slipped through the front door, which creaked open as if it hadn't been touched in years. Inside, the air was thick with dust and mold, and the floorboards creaked under our feet. Every step made my heart pound harder. We crept down the hallway, the dim light of our phone flashlights barely cutting through the darkness. Then we found the room. The walls were covered in photographs. But these weren't just any photos. They were of students, our classmates. Some of the faces I recognized, but others I didn't. And then I saw my own picture. There it was, pinned to the wall, staring back at me. My blood ran cold. "Lily, look," I whispered, my voice shaking. She turned and saw it too. Pictures of her, of both of us walking to school, sitting in class, and even hanging out at lunch. We hadn't even known someone was watching us. Before we could react, we heard footsteps behind us, slow and deliberate, like someone was sneaking up on us. My heart stopped. I turned around and saw Mr. Holloway standing in the doorway, his face half hidden in the shadows. But his eyes, those cold, lifeless eyes, were fixed right on us. "You shouldn't be here," he said in a voice that was too calm for the situation. He took a step toward us, and I froze, paralyzed with fear. Lily grabbed my arm, yanking me out of my shock. I spotted a rusted metal rod lying against the wall, and grabbed it without thinking. I swung it as hard as I could, hitting Mr. Holloway square in the chest. He stumbled back, groaning in pain, and we ran. We didn't stop until we were far enough away, panting and trembling with fear. We called the police, and they swarmed the place within minutes. What they found was far worse than we ever imagined. Mr. Holloway wasn't just a creepy substitute. He was a predator. The police discovered that he had been stalking and abducting students for years, taking advantage of runaway teens who no one would notice were missing. Lily and I were lucky to escape that night, but the images of that house and those photographs are burned into my mind forever. Even though Mr. Holloway is behind bars now, I still get chills every time I walk through the school hallways, feeling like someone's watching, waiting.